Hey, now, my listeners, we have been in our series on Know About AI. We're still in that series, and I wanted to take a few minutes today to talk about an article that came out this week. It was in Teen Vogue, it came out on May 1st, and it talks about some of the ways that young adults are currently using AI. So, I wanted to talk about this for a couple of reasons. I think it shows some trends. It kind of dovetails with things that I've seen in other articles and studies, and that have even come up in our interviews in this series about how people are using AI. And I want to get your take on it too. So, seriously, comment, email me. I want to know if you are using AI in any of these ways and what your thoughts are. I'm going to share a few of my reactions and my opinions on some of the potential pitfalls of using AI in these ways. But then again, like I said, I want to hear from you. My dog's in the background. I can't keep him out of my office right now because it's a rainy day and he gets scared when it's raining. So if you hear weird noises, I'm just going to go with it. I'm going to keep recording and let him stay in here. So here are the three things that I want to look at specifically. These are kind of themes that I've seen in this Teen Vote article that are consistent with other things I've seen regarding AI. Should AI replace or help supplement interpersonal conversations? Should AI replace or help brainstorming? For instance, organizing your thoughts in a difficult or confusing situation, organizing thoughts for work. And should AI replace or augment therapy? Let's start by looking at this Teen Vogue article. So it is called, the title is How Are Students Using ChatGPT for Therapy, Breakups, and Even Texting Friends? And so one of the people that is quoted as a college student in this article is called MC. And here's a quote. I started using ChatGPT about what to text a crush and random topics I was interested in because I was afraid my friends would get sick of me talking about certain things too often. We all have our little obsessions, so I think we probably can all resonate with that fear a little bit, but it reminded me of something I actually saw a few months ago in the Wall Street Journal. There was an article titled, When There's No School Counselor, There's a Bot, and I'll talk more about that general topic in a few minutes. But basically, the premise is there's this new program that several schools are trying out called Sunny, where basically it is a chat bot that students can uh, chat with and text because there's a shortage of school counselors. And these chats are monitored by real people. But anyways, it is an AI chatbot that students can converse with. And so one of the students who has been using Sunny was 17-year-old Michelle, who said, I can become very obsessive about certain situations, and I know I can annoy my friends when I talk about a certain situation over and over again, she says. I don't feel like I'm annoying Sunny. Okay, so this may seem harmless or like a helpful function that AI can provide, being a sounding board. It may even seem like it promotes self-awareness. If you don't want to go on and on about something and annoy your real life friends, you can just talk to a bot. But I think there are a few big underlying problems with this. One, it kind of reinforces a negative insecurity that a lot of people can have. I grew up a very shy person. I was often even though I had a lot of great friends, initially I was really shy, and it would be really hard for me to even go up to people that I knew and kind of break into the circle of conversation. I remember my mom telling me, just go up and start talking to your friends. Like, they don't care. They'd be happy to talk to you. But that was so hard for me. And it was a really healthy thing for me to learn, though, how to get past that fear and open up to friends, opening up even after talking with them. That's something else that I've struggled with. Like, do I really want to get vulnerable? Do I really want to share about this? But learning to be vulnerable and be okay with just being myself in front of people has been so liberating. And if you don't feel like you can do that in front of people, they might not be good friends. And even though it may be difficult and painful to realize that, if you don't ever realize that, then you're never going to move on to healthier relationships. And this is something that even MC, the person quoted in Teen Vogue, actually learned, because they said after a while they stopped using ChatGPT so much for that purpose. They said, I think it's sort of a cop out for facing your fears. I guess my feeling now is that if someone is sick of hearing about something, they'll tell me. I get hung up on certain things just as much as other people, and it's not really fair to your friends to assume ill of them if it's not justified, even in your anxieties. And I think that's really wise because not only are you kind of not facing your fears about approaching friends or opening up about your interest or being honest, you're also doing them a disservice by not giving them the chance to be honest with you or to potentially actually care about what you want to say. There's a great C.S. Lewis quote, and I can't remember it word for word off the top of my head, but it goes something like this. The foundation for friendship is somebody saying, you too, I thought I was the only one. In other words, finding that shared interest. So when you are cutting yourself off from even sharing that to begin with or talking with people because you're nervous or insecure about it, you could be cutting yourself off from actually forging deeper ties and connections with people. And here's the other thing that I'll say about that before I move on to kind of the next issue is I think that when we turn to a bot, when we turn to ChatGPT or AI to basically handle the annoying quirks that we all have so that we don't burden our friends with those aspects of us, we're actually kind of absolving other people from being a real friend. Because the reality is, as humans, this goes back to what I believe we were created for, which was community and connection. But even sociological studies will show that humans do need interpersonal connection. And we have certain social responsibilities to one another. And in our very individualistic society, we don't like that. Now, this might be a little controversial, but I actually think that there are a lot of the big issues that our society and culture are wrestling with, like these big ethical problems that really boil down to a severance of our sense of responsibility to one another as human beings. One of those is abortion because it views the unborn child as inconvenient or undesirable or impossible for, to care for. So the first social responsibility tie that is severed there is between the mother and her unborn child. But then it also absolves the biological father with any sense of responsibility that he should have toward the mother and the child, because he can easily say, well, if you can get an abortion, then I don't need to provide the care that socially, biologically speaking, I should be providing. It absolves society from their responsibility to the new family. Do you know how many big corporations pretend to be pro-woman by saying, we'll pay for you to travel out of state to get an abortion, but if you decide to have the baby, we're not paying for maternity leave or we're not increasing our parental benefits at all. Okay, think about that. Are they really supporting you if the only will support you if you choose one particular option that's actually cheaper for them? What about when it comes to assisted suicide? This is another thing where when you have somebody who is elderly, somebody who is chronically ill, terminally ill, even disabled, you will see in countries and states where it has been legalized, people actually documenting being pushed by their doctors, by their insurance companies, even sometimes sadly by their relatives toward choosing assisted suicide when they otherwise might not because it's cheaper. It's more convenient. So those are, heavy examples, but I think it boils down to kind of the same root issue. The more we focus on ourselves as only individuals, and the more we cut ourselves off from our responsibility to our fellow human beings, then the easier it is to say, oh, I don't want to deal with having to help support the young families and the single moms in my community. So I'm going to support legal abortion. I don't want to have to help support or deal with or house relatives who need round the clock care in their, the end of their life, or, relatives who are disabled. So I'm going to support assisted suicide. Or I don't want to have to sit there and talk to somebody about something that I'm not interested in, so they can go talk to ChatGPT about it. Maybe that's a little too strong. Maybe you have a different opinion. Let me know what you think. But let's move on to the next use of AI that is often quoted. And that is to just kind of help articulate thoughts in difficult conversations. So another quote from the Teen Vogue article, this is from Vivian. She had a dispute with her roommate. They had an argument and she was writing a text and she wanted to get her point across, but sound less angry and less passive aggressive. And so ChatGPT helped her kind of rewrite what she needed to say. And another example is a 20-year-old who said, AI helps me articulate and explain my thoughts and feelings better. When I am just ranting about whatever is on my mind, ChatGPT distills concise information from different sources. They go on to say friends can give negative, biased feedback or advice that the AI might not. Even if AI is biased, it'll be biased toward protecting you. Okay, a couple of things here. I could see how this could potentially be more helpful, or at least seem like it. But here are a couple of things. One, it goes back to the connection with people. If you don't have a friend in your life that is able to be objective or set personal bias aside for you, then again, look for better friends, because I can't tell you how many times I have called a really close friend of mine or talked to my husband or my mom about a situation, whether it was personal, whether it was work related, where I needed some feedback. And I don't just want somebody to echo my own thoughts and my own rants and be on my side. We all need that sometimes emotionally, but what we really need is somebody who will help us think through a sticky situation, who can bring an outside perspective. And even if emotionally they are on our side, they can still help us say, well, let's think about it from the other perspective. Let's try to look at it from all these different angles. And they can help you think more clearly. Friends can do that. Real people can do that. Also, you might not always have time to go ask ChatGPT to help you rewrite that email or that text, because at some point in your life, uncomfortable as it might be, you're going to have a conflict with somebody face to face. And it might pop up when you're not even expecting it. Maybe somebody confronts you unfairly at work, maybe a dispute that has been over text or email or something like that boils up. In person. It's definitely going to happen in family. And the ability to react calmly, even in a heated situation, and articulate your thoughts and your points without getting overly emotional, that is a life skill. And it's something that comes with practice. Yeah, some people are naturally better at it than others, but it comes with practice. So when you do have time to kind of craft a response in a difficult situation, what might be more helpful in the long run? Turning to ChatGPT and having them kind of clean it up for you and send it off? Or maybe taking the time to get, a notepad and a pen and sit there and brainstorm. Journaling is something that is often recommended because it's so good, not just for helping you collect your thoughts yourself, but to learn more about yourself. You could actually understand your own side better, understand the situation better, maybe even uncover some root issues that are going on deep inside when you take the time to really think it out yourself. Additionally, it actually is physically forming your brain, forming a habit, another neural pathway in your mind, so that the next time you have a face-to-face conflict that just pops up, you're going to be more prepared to deal with it in a healthy way, because whenever you had the time, you took the time to think through it. This goes back to some of the things we've talked about with past guests in this series, of just choosing the process. We have so many things that can be automated today, but when we choose to process, we actually reap long-term benefits from that in our own minds. And then I will just mention this quickly. AI is not unbiased. And so I think that is a big misconception. You can look up liberal bias in AI and Google articles on that and find plenty. You could even look up conservative bias. You could look up hateful bias. Everybody from all ends of the ideological and political spectrum have bones to pick with certain things that AI has said or produced, misinformation they've produced. This misinformation in AI is called hallucination. And we shouldn't really be surprised that we do find bias in AI a lot of times. I mean, it's created by people. So, whoever is behind the technology can inform the bias of the technology. I think that AI will only become more biased. I haven't actually researched this to know if it's happening, but it wouldn't surprise me. Think about even just what a lot of people use AI for, which is like organizing a travel itinerary. And this is honestly one of the most attractive uses of AI that I've heard about because it can research destinations. You could give it a budget and say, these are the kind of activities I'm interested in, and it'll generate a whole itinerary. That seems helpful. I'm not saying you shouldn't use it for that, but think about this. On social media, we already have so many ads that are so specifically targeted toward us. It's annoying. But if travel companies, the tourist industry, if they know that people are turning to AI and trusting AI to plan their itineraries, don't you think it's likely that they're going to pay companies like OpenAI big bucks to direct people towards their stuff that's going to make them more money? I think we're going to be able to trust AI less and less the more people use it and the more established it becomes, because it's just going to become another place for people to put ads. And I don't think it's actually going to be, genuine information. I think a lot of it's going to be manipulating us so that other people can, benefit, however, probably monetarily. That's my theory. So just keep that in mind whenever you're using AI. So let's go do the therapy thing. Again, let's go back to that Wall Street Journal article about the school counseling program called Sunny. Now, the reason that even exists is because there is unfortunately a shortage of school counselors, and there is a big problem when it comes to youth mental health. So these are issues that we have to acknowledge when we start talking about this. And Sunny is a little different. It's not just ChatGPT because it is monitored by real humans. So students can choose to text Sunny, and then they'll have, a human that's monitoring a limited number of conversations, and they can intervene if they see something that is alarming, or if the student needs to graduate, so to speak, to actually talking to somebody in person. But at least it gets people talking. There are a lot of reasons why people might turn to a tool like Sunny or ChatGPT to deal with therapy issues. Maybe they can't afford to go to therapy. We have to acknowledge that it's not really accessible for everybody. Maybe they are kind of hesitant or unsure or embarrassed to talk about certain things. This was something that the Teen Vogue article mentioned. Maybe they need something to hold them over in between sessions. And so it could be something that they turn to in the interim to maybe get tips for grounding themselves. If they're feeling like they're having an onslaught of anxiety or a negative thought spiral, they can turn to ChatGPT or to a chat bot that can give them mental health tips. So again, we have to acknowledge that sometimes there are barriers for people to receive true mental health help. However, I do think we need to be careful about viewing generative AI like ChatGPT as some sort of long-term solution, because one of the big root causes of mental health problems right now that a lot of people have pointed to is just loneliness. And again, that's not the only thing, but a couple years ago, the US Surgeon General actually issued a study on the epidemic of loneliness. We are more isolated from our communities, from each other, than we've really ever been in our nation's history. Because again, we have a very individualistic society, and we're not in person with people. We don't have those core places and activities like that connect us. And that's a whole, we've talked about this a little bit on the No I podcast. I'll link some episodes where we dive into this a little bit more. but we may be more connected, but we're actually, when it comes to connections that matter, we're very isolated. So turning to something that's going to isolate you even more, that just doesn't seem like a very healthy long-term solution to me. And we also, again, we know that chatbots like ChatGPT and others can be biased. They can have these hallucinations. So what if you get information that's not helpful? Especially in the age of the internet, you can have, 100 fake experts for every 10 real experts. And so we see this on social media too. I mean, anybody can hop online and say that they're an expert. So you've got a real problem, I think, with a lot of junk psychology, bad therapy that's not really therapy. The thing is, AI is not a licensed therapist. It doesn't have a degree in psychology. And just because it can distill information from, different data points or from around the internet, it doesn't mean that it's a critically thinking human person who's actually has a life experience and has studied and has emotional intelligence that is able to converse with you and help you through a mental health crisis. There's also a lawsuit that's going on because tragically, there was a young teenage boy who took his life, and his parents say he was texting a chatbot character that he had created just before that happened that was encouraging him to do that. So that might be a rare occurrence, but we know these hallucinations do happen. And there are just so many documented instances of chatbots going beyond the supposed boundaries and parameters they have. Even when you talk about sort of the romantic role play usage, the Wall Street Journal just did a big investigative article on that and how companies like Mark Zuckerberg's Meta are pushing these companions that are not respecting like age boundaries with people and talking about explicit content. So if all of that is happening, and we know that it is, then it's not really a far jump to say, well, then whenever you're in a mental health crisis and you're talking to ChatGPT, it might not actually give you good information. It might give you harmful information. So again, can it be useful in a very limited capacity, maybe like in the school counselor setting where these chats are actually being monitored by real people, but maybe they kind of get students in the door to at least talk about how they're feeling and it kind of serves as a bridge to a real life person? Maybe so. And maybe in an emergency, there are instances where it could be helpful. However, I just think we really need to be careful about thinking of this as like, oh, some great long-term solution. So many more people are going to have access to mental health information now. If the root cause is isolation, going back to what we were talking about at the beginning, with us not being there for one another, isolating ourselves from one another, society not being willing to bear one another's burdens, then I don't really think we can say that chatbot therapy is a real solution for mental health. That's what I think. But again, I'd love to know your thoughts. If you have used ChatGPT or any other large language model, AI, generative AI tool for any of the things that we've talked about today, let me know because maybe I'm way off here. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm going to be disproven. Maybe there's something I'm not seeing. Or if you agree, let me know too. I think this is something that we really need to think about. And it's easy to get wowed by how amazing something is working right off the bat. But we need to think deeply about what are the ramifications? What are the problems that it seems like it's fixing? And is it really a solution to the underlying issue? Or is it a band-aid that is been put over with no medicine that's going to turn into a nasty infection and get really, really bad after a while? Maybe that was a little bit too graphic of a metaphor, but I think we need to think about that because AI is not going anywhere. So we have to learn how to deal with it in a healthy way. And if it's not going to be regulated, which it might be, and that's a topic that I'm hoping to discuss. I'm actually working on getting an interview booked on that topic right now. But if it's not going to be regulated, we're going to have to self-regulate in how we use AI. And I think that that's probably the most likely reality that we need to prepare ourselves for. So anyway, let me know your thoughts. Also, please share the Know I podcast, share this episode or any other episode that you found helpful, and please go and leave a review wherever you listen to podcasts. Tell people what you think about it, and stay tuned because we will have more content on AI and all the things that we need to think about regarding AI coming soon.